What's up, Bug Geeks? This is Aaron with Phoenix Pest Control in Knoxville, Tennessee, and you're listening to the world's #1 pest control training podcast, the Pest Geek Podcast with Frank Hernandez.
Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to another edition of the Pest Geek podcast. I am Frank Hernandez, your pest geek, here discussing all things pest. We want to remind our audience to join in on the revolution. That's right, join in on the conversation, be part of the society. Pest Geek Podcast Listeners Group on Facebook. And we're on YouTube. We're on the web, pestgeekpodcast.com. Check out there the notes, everything that we put into the podcast. They're all on there. And now for today's topic. I've got on the phone Stephen Vantassel. He's a wildlife expert, and if there was a who's who in wildlife, he'd be in it. We've had a couple of discussions. We're getting ready. You've got a couple of podcasts that are ready to go for us that are going to be airing pretty soon in the next couple of weeks. And I wanted the audience to get a chance to get to know you about your background. I am no wildlife expert. As a matter of fact, I'm not even a wildlife dummy. I don't know anything about wildlife. Yeah, I'm a pest geek.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to plead ignorance, total ignorance on wildlife. I looked at it into doing it before, and it wasn't for me. So I decided not even to keep going. But so hopefully you're a great addition to this team because you're what we're missing.
I appreciate that.
Go ahead.
You chose wisely, though. There's more money in bugs.
Really? Well, we'll find out. I know there's a lot of guys doing really well out there. I'm in a lot of the groups. There's wildlife people are in, and I listen and I observe, but I have no idea half the time what they're talking about. A lot of the animals they're dealing with, we don't have. I'm in a metropolis here of South Florida, and about the closest thing we get to wildlife is probably I see a possum. A raccoon, some peacocks, which are protected. We can't touch them, and rats. That's about it. That's all we got. So tell the audience. I mean, how let's talk a little bit about your background. How did you get involved at all in wildlife control?
Well, I was raised in Springfield, Massachusetts, and so when I was growing up, I wanted to learn how to trap. And when you're in an urbanized environment, the only real way to trap is trapping in urban areas. And so I thought, well, why if people do have conflicts with wildlife? So I said maybe I could trap wildlife. So I contacted the state and wanted to see if I could do this. And they said, well, we have a license, but you're too young. So the next year I applied again, and then they gave me the license. It's called a problem animal control permit. Massachusetts was kind of an early adopter of this license. It was one of the few states, as I understand at the time, back in the 80s, to have a license for wildlife control. So the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife gave it to me. So to my knowledge, I was one of the first group of people that had the license. So that's how I got started.
And how old were you when you got into this? What, 17, 16?
I think around 18. It was just before I got into college.
Okay.
So, I did it during the summers and played with it, and then wrote my first article when I was in seminary for Trapper Magazine at the time. So I then did it. Then I went into ministry for a couple of years, and then I decided to do it full time, which I then started my own business full time. I was doing it part time prior to that. Did that for almost 5 years. Sold the company for the new guy for a couple of years, and then went off on other things. My life changed a little bit with question one. I was involved in the Ban Cruel Traps campaign that occurred in Massachusetts in '96. I fought that legislation. It was a ballot initiative, but of course we lost big time, and that affected my ability to trap ground moles. And fortunately, that was one part of my business that was a renewal portion, so I lost the ability to use that. And then I got tired of climbing ladders. Wildlife control, real money at it, you have to climb the ladders, and that's really what people, if they really think about it, if you're going to make money in wildlife control, you're making it in the repairs. You're not really making it in the trapping. Anyone, practically anyone can trap.
Right.
The repairs where the money is.
Gotcha. So the exclusion, the repairs, I see you guys putting up all kinds of stuff,
right.
Metal and stuff, which, I get the principle of it. So that's an interesting career, because you went mostly to divinity school. You went, and then you chose a wildlife career, which is, I see this constantly in this industry, that people start one thing. They start out in finance and they end up running, a pest control business. We come from all over and all different walks of life. I see electrical engineers that are doing pest control, and I'm like, okay, I would have not done that, but my career was in programming.
Yeah. Right.
So,
well, I think if I had to do it over again, I would have certainly chosen different academic life than what I chose. And unfortunately, that's the way it is. I mean, that's why I become sort of a critic for people. As look, if you're going to go to college, long and hard about whether it's really worth it.
Yeah.
Because so I think we've sold our kids, basically a lie that college is necessary, and the reality is a lot of times it's not.
Yes.
And we need to fight that in a lot of different ways. If I had to do it over, I would have gone into bugs. There's a lot more money in bugs. People all the time, don't go into wildlife. There's more money in bugs. But, it is what it is.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't believe me because wildlife is sexier. Like, oh, you're playing mountain man and what have you. But it's an interesting field, and so I'm in the more the educational side of things. And so my desire and passion is really into wildlife damage identification, because if you can't identify the culprit properly, you're going to be wasting a lot of time. And I'm also big into methodology and zoonotics and that sort of thing. So everything related to wildlife control. And of course, my other passion is human dimensions, which is just a fancy word, meaning how people think about animals, how they think about wildlife, the animal rights movement. I did my dissertation on the animal rights movement, and this is one of my deep passions. I wish I got more traction with it with people in the pest control world and the wildlife control world. A lot of times people are so busy making money, they forget that the landscape's changing. Yes. And they don't realize how quickly the legal landscape can change on them. As a board member of the National Wildlife Control Operators Association, what we found is that people don't care about our association until an issue arises in their state, and then they wonder why we're not dropping $1 million into a legal campaign. So it's interesting how people think that nothing matters until it's on their doorstep.
Right.
And then they wonder why someone didn't do something. Yeah. Well, I feel like the parakeet in the mine. I keep tweeting out that there's bad gas in the chamber, and very few people care.
Yeah, no, I see that a lot. It obviously not as much as obviously the pest control industry. The associations are well established. The big companies fund all this, and there's big money available for a lot of the problems that the pest control industry has to deal with legally. Obviously, the landscape for
Right.
us is changing more in the attitudes of people and their buying behavior, and their the way that they perceive that they want pest control done. Because most people don't understand animals. They don't understand pests either. But there's a big movement in the
Right.
eco-friendly area and things like that. In that landscape, I've seen it change and the attitude change over the last 10 years. But you mentioned a couple of things for us guys that have no clue what you just said. What the heck is zoonotics? Explain that to us, and because most of my audience is going to be pest control, and I'm sure they're interested in wildlife, but I have no clue what that means.
Okay, zoonotics are
Okay, zoonotics.
is
Okay,
just a fancy word. Zoonotics is spelled Zoonotics. Zoonotics. Basically, diseases that come from wildlife that can affect humans.
gotcha. So in the case of where we deal with it in the case of mosquitoes, with birds, and where they transmit the disease to the mosquito and then the mosquito to human.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So that's
Correct.
That's what we're talking about. Okay. So so
Yeah. So rabies would be a zoonotic.
Gotcha.
That would be a famous zoonotic.
Gotcha. And you're in Montana, okay? Because you probably you got a beautiful state to look at. I have traffic.
Yeah.
Talk to me about different things.
And just the pictures.
Yeah. and as far as what experiences, like, I guess it would change state to state and area to area, what a lot of wildlife guys have to deal with. But in the issue of, you mentioned about the landscape and the legal problems, and the things that pop up, what are you seeing on the horizon that it's sticking out, that might affect other states, or things that you know about that guys need to look at, or something that you see coming down the pike, in that area that you just mentioned?
What I see coming down the pike is essentially the following: the issue of people trying to pierce the legal distinction between domestic and wildlife animals.
Mm-hmm.
So this is probably the biggest challenge that we're facing at the moment, and a lot of guys aren't really prepared emotionally for this change. Let me explain what that means. When we talk about handling animals, there is a distinction between wildlife and domestic animals. So, for example, you can shoot a deer, you can't shoot your dog. So that would be considered cruelty. You can't shoot your dog. So you can't drown a cat in many places. Now, there are going to be exceptions, of course. I'm talking in broad terms.
Right.
Cat and just kill it as it may be someone's property. Domestic animals are considered property, where wildlife are considered, owned by the state or owned by God. So the rules are different. So you can do things with wildlife in terms of their treatment that you could never do with domestic animal. So what happens is a lot of people don't realize that when they're trapping a raccoon, it may be legal for them to drown it. There are animal control officers, humane people, or animal rights activists who will want to take you to court if they see you drowning a raccoon and take you up on animal cruelty charges, because they're trying to use the rules governing domestic animals, apply it to wildlife. They're trying to pierce that legal distinction. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I see it. Somebody freaks out because they figured out that you're drowning an animal when they feel it shouldn't be done. They should be done in another way.
Right.
But they're not a wildlife expert. They don't understand, or could I know that
Well, it's not about
Go ahead.
It's not about being a wildlife expert. It's about which law are you going to apply to the cruelty case.
Gotcha.
So you have laws that govern domestic animals, and you have laws that govern the treatment of wildlife.
Right.
And they're trying to use domestic laws apply that. All you're going to do is find a judge to agree with you and say that the laws that apply to domestic animals apply to wildlife.
Gotcha.
We had a situation that happened to a guy, unfortunately, in Connecticut. Connecticut did not allow the translocation of rabies vector species. Those are animals that can spread rabies.
Right.
And so he had the raccoon in a cage to the edge of a pier. The people asked him, "What are you going to do with that raccoon?" And he said, "Well, the law says I can't translocate it. I have to kill it." And so then he threw it off the pier and drowned it. Totally legal. He didn't break the law. The people brought charges against him for animal cruelty, and it cost him thousands of dollars to defend himself. He ultimately won, but that was an attempt to bridge the gap, the legal distinction between domestic animals and wildlife.
Gotcha. Yeah,
and that can happen to any pest controller or any wildlife control operator. All it takes is someone try to push the case.
Yeah, I know. I see
now
now what
today
you're
it's
talking
illegal.
about.
Now today it's illegal for a wildlife control operator to have a caged animal and drown it.
And that's in general. Is that in general, or is that just a state-by-state issue?
Connecticut.
In Connecticut, gotcha.
It's a state-by-state issue. State-by-state issue. But when people tell me that they think it's hard to get legislation through the government, oh, it's not. You'd be surprised. If you have a YouTube moment,
yeah,
surprised how fast it is to get a law passed on wildlife or animals through the state legislatures if you have a good YouTube moment. And so this is why we keep trying to, wildlife control operators, be careful what you're posting on Facebook, careful what you're posting on YouTube. You need to be sure that you're acting in a responsible way toward wildlife, because a lot of people care about how those animals are treated.
Right. Yeah, and I saw this one of the title of your. Go ahead.
Well, so what people don't realize is that when you're in the business long enough, you get a little cavalier, you get a little callous, cause you to do things to wildlife, to the animal that's caught, that could be considered cruel from an outsider's perspective, and may be cruel, maybe unnecessary roughness, because, well, it's just, the 10,000th raccoon you've caught, and, it's just one different day, different raccoon. Start losing the fact that to the people watching you, that's not a raccoon, that's Rocky the raccoon.
Right. Yeah, no, I can see that. Like I said, I know you're doing a couple of podcasts for us on one on the disposal of carcasses, and then also on euthanasia, things like that, where, is there a method that, that would be, let's say, the most socially, I guess when you take your animal to a vet and they tell you they got to put him to sleep, they give him a shot. Is that something,
right.
I'm talking about from the people listening, would that be something, in other words, you say, we do it this way or we do it that way? Is there any particular way that's, I guess, more acceptable than others in the industry, or preferred, or what people are seeing? Because that's one of the things that turned me off.
Yes.
I got to be honest. It turned me off about doing wildlife is the fact that I couldn't put an animal to sleep. I would have rather transport them, and it's not allowed, because here in Florida, I need in writing 20 acres of somebody to allow me to move it. I know a lot of the guys that I see doing it, they're running in a pest control truck with chemical in the back, a spray rig, and then 2 cages hanging out from the side, and they're going out to the Everglades and releasing the animals. And I see that all the time. I said,
right.
that is totally wrong. it's against the law, but yet, you don't want to, these guys don't want to kill them and they want to solve the client's problem. And, it's kind of like, a mess for some people that don't understand the wildlife laws. But let's talk a little bit about that euthanasia or how.
Okay, well, let's talk about that because that's very disappointing, and a lot of people want to translocate. I'm not always so sure that all of them want to translocate. Let's define some terms here.
Okay.
Translocation means moving an animal and releasing it outside of its home range. So if a raccoon has a home range of a square mile and you drive it 20 miles, dump it, you've released that animal out of its home range.
Okay.
Relocation is the movement of an animal within its home range. Now, why is that important? The animal is in its home range. It is familiar with its surroundings. It has access to its house. It has access to, it knows where the predators are. It's comfortable in its surroundings. Translocate an animal, and now it has to find food, shelter while avoiding predators and nightfall, or if it's a nocturnal animal, avoiding daybreak before it gets eaten by something or freeze to death. So a lot of people think that translocation is humane when for many animals probably not very humane, and it actually increases mortality, and it also raises the specter of translocating a disease into a new area that wasn't there initially. So there's a lot. So it has a lot of feel-good factor.
Right.
Feel-good factors often based on ignorance.
Yes.
Now I think that's the positive. I think part of the reason why people want to translocate animals because it's costly to kill and dispose of carcasses.
Yes.
It's not really done for humane reasons in their mind. I'm taking their definition of humane, but they're doing it for financial reasons because it's faster, cheaper. Dump it somewhere else.
Right.
So in terms of what are the acceptable methods of killing? Well, I'm talking about this at the Pest World Expo in Florida next month.
Oh, you're going to be here in October. Okay.
I'll be there in October. I'm talking about animal euthanasia and carcass disposal there. I have an hour presentation. But let's talk a little bit about what it means. The reality is it depends on which group people you're referring to. If you're talking to hardcore animal rights activists, the answer is none of the above. They're going to say you shouldn't be killing animals at all, be doing one-way doors and nest boxes for the young, and that's on the more liberal view of the animal rights movement. You have others that will say if you're going to kill an animal, you got to euthanize it according to the principles governed by the AVMA, which would be carbon dioxide. You might be able to use carbon monoxide on some. You could use lethal injection, but the problem is we don't have access to lethal injection unless you have a veterinarian who's willing to give you access to the drugs. So you're at carbon dioxide, maybe carbon monoxide. For some animals, you could use cervical dislocation, like with birds. Cervical dislocation is coming under fire. Carbon monoxide is coming under fire. Carbon dioxide is coming under fire. So if wildlife control operators and pest control professionals think that everything's hunky-dory if they have a carbon dioxide chamber that they're using, it's only hunky-dory for the time being.
Right. Because
states are banning, I think Pennsylvania banned the use of carbon monoxide, growing scrutiny on carbon dioxide. It's not necessarily humane. So let's talk about euthanasia versus humane killing. Euthanasia means that the animal must be unconscious during death. Humane killing, the animal is conscious during death, but it's dying quickly. the difference? Well, if you're unconscious, you can't feel pain. You can't suffer because you can't experience any discomfort. Carbon dioxide can do that. Carbon monoxide can do that. Lethal injection can do that. Ultimately, a lot of things in the wild, we don't have always the access to tools. If I use a conibear, a 220 conibear on a raccoon out of a second floor window as a blind set, it's not euthanasia. That may be humane killing, but it's not euthanasia because that raccoon's going to be alive for a while it's dying. Be conscious. If I take a raccoon and drown it, that may be humane killing, but it's not euthanasia because the raccoon is conscious while it's dying. So this is the problem that we have. We don't have access to a lot of tools that give us the flexibility to apply euthanasia because we don't have access to the drugs. And then secondly, we're in situations where euthanasia is not practical. I mean, can you imagine having to do lethal injection on house mice? How many pest control operators are going to be out doing lethal injection on house mice? How about rats? So that means your snap trap, you think your snap trap kills instantly? It doesn't. Don't even get me talking about glue boards.
Yeah.
I'm amazed at people who hate trappers. They hate us trappers because we're the spawn of Satan, yet they'll use glue boards with relish. Really? The mouse is actually having a good time on that glue board? Dancing on it?
Yeah, no, that's really one of those that people are, the cruelty issue with the rats.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm not wanting to ban glue boards. I don't want the people to think I want to ban glue boards.
Right.
But I want pest control operators to be consistent. And the only reason why pest control operators have been under the radar is because they're killing animals that the public still hates. The public still hates mice. The public still hates rats. But when you're dealing with wildlife, we're dealing with a lot more than mice and rats. We're dealing with raccoons. We call them charismatic megafauna, right? These are the animals that Disney makes movies about, right? The raccoons and skunks, and they're all talking to each other, and they're all having a good time, and all this sort of nonsense, right? So this is where we have people need to realize that many urbanites, I call them urbanites because they have an urban worldview. They've lost the reality that to live is to kill, and they need to realize that when we're dealing with urbanites, they don't want to think about death. I think of this as a profoundly theological problem. Let me get a little spiritual on people here. This is why when you're dealing with your client, when you talk, they will, in 1 minute, they will say, I don't care what you have to do, get that squirrel out of my house. As soon as you have the squirrel in the cage, they're going to ask you, what are you going to do with that? Now, what happened in the 5 seconds that occurred in? How did the person go from, I don't care what you do to that squirrel, you get it out of my house, to, what are you going to do with that? Schizophrenic. And here's the issue. People want their emotions, and they don't want to think about the animal's death. Why? Because the animal's death reminds them of their own death. This brings up profound emotional issues that your client doesn't even understand. I used to sell life insurance. People would not buy life insurance. You want to know why? Because they knew as soon as they bought it, they would die. So as long as they didn't buy it, they would live forever. But buying life insurance was acknowledgement of their mortality. The same reason why people don't put up wills. They don't make a will because they don't think, they can't deal with the reality that they're finite, that they are going to meet their maker. And they ignore it as long as they can. even they die before they ever get their will put together.
Right.
Wildlife control brings up those powerful emotions, and your wildlife control operators need to be prepared to deal with that. So when I had people asking me questions, what are you going to do with that? I'd ask them, do you really want to know? Yeah, almost always, not always, but a lot of times they would say, no, I'm good, because they don't want to know. Rob Erickson was a leader in this industry back in the day. He still has influence, to be sure, but he was an early founder of the industry. He made a comment which I think is spot on, which is our job is to protect the activities of our clients. We're basically undertakers. We do what the client is unable emotionally to do. Sometimes they can't do it physically because, like bat work, it's hard work. But bats, you're usually not killing bats. Usually you're just excluding bats. For most animal situations, that we're a hitman. We're a hired hitman. Come in, take care of the problem, and leave.
Yeah. No, I can see a couple of things because I faced it when I had clients ask me to remove animals from their property. And, we always have to deal with the issue. Also it comes down to the financial. I mean, can you imagine, based on what you just described to me, that all of a sudden I tell the client, yes, I'll remove the animal, and then I have to legally take him to a veterinarian, and the veterinarian has to put him to sleep, and then I have to dispose of the body. That's going to cost you $250 just to do that process, or whatever it is, compared to what it is to what it is now. I mean, once we start dealing with that, all of a sudden people get hit with the reality and says, what am I going to do? And I see the conversations because I'm in the groups that deal with wildlife, and people are expecting wildlife people to come out like they're wards of the state, that they work for them, and they're supposed to remove animals for free. Right. We deal with it. I see that all the time. People upset about that you charge to remove an animal.
Right.
I'm looking at that.
This is a problem because, I think that I'm a government worker in my day job, right? So one of the things I tell people is, first of all, if you think the government's free, I tell them flat out. They say, is this free? I said, no, it's not free. Nothing the government does is free. So that's the first thing we need to stop using that language, that government is free. I used to tell people when I was in business doing wildlife control work, I would say, aren't your taxes high enough? Can you imagine what our taxes would be if the government took over the obligation of doing wildlife control? Can you imagine what they would be?
Right. Property taxes would go to the roof. Yeah.
So I think we need to stop. So one of my pet peeves is that we need to stop using the word free when it comes to government. Like the Bernie Sanders free education. That's a lie. It's not free.
Right. Taxes pay for it.
Who's paying for it?
Right.
We need to be honest. Tell people it's not free. Where someone's paying for it. Oh, I'm going to go to Europe and get free education. You go over to Europe and you buy a soda and it costs you $2. Is education free? No, it's not free. It's being taxed by everybody.
Right.
We need to make sure our terms are right. But you're absolutely correct. It's going to increase cost if we have to go to a veterinarian. And you're assuming that the veterinarian will even do the work, because the other aspect, people tell me, oh, I follow the AVMA guidelines. You have to look at them and say, are you really following AVMA guidelines? Because the AVMA guidelines is that the veterinarian is to act on the benefit and on behalf, thinking about animals' interests. When I was doing wildlife control, I wasn't thinking about the animal's interest. I was thinking about the client's interest. Am I killing this raccoon? Am I doing the raccoon a favor? Yeah, if the raccoon was sick and severely injured, I would be doing the animal a favor. I'd be putting out of its misery. But 99% of the time, I wasn't doing the raccoon a favor. The raccoon had a wonderful house. It was warm and it was insulated. Food nearby. Come in and remove it. Why? I'm not doing the raccoon a favor. So we need to be careful about what our ideology is, and so we have an ideology infecting America says that animals are just people. This is why you will never hear me call humans animals. I don't believe humans are animals. To me, there's a chasm between an animal and a human.
Right.
They're fundamentally different. So we can do things to animals that we'd never do to a human. I don't eat people. So that flows from my theology. It flows from my understanding of the world. But I ask even, atheists, I mean, if you're an atheist, do you really think that a human, another animal, if that's the case, if you really believe that, then why can't I act like an animal? So these are profound questions that are being raised, and unfortunately, our society, we're losing the importance of the distinction between animals and humans. And some of your wildlife control operators in pest control companies are doing wildlife control work, and they're not being aware of this groundswell. It's slow. Cancer, changing the perspective of the public's animal control, and some of them are going to get blindsided by it. They're not being proactive. Now, what are the ways to be proactive? Number one, always act going to be videotaped in whatever you do.
Right.
And ask yourself the question, if you get videotaped doing what you're doing, are you going to be ashamed of what you did? Let me give people an illustration. If they think I'm going to be a holier than thou, let me give them a concrete illustration that occurred with me. This is about me, what I did. I was involved in the mid-Atlantic rabies epidemic because it came through Springfield, Massachusetts in the mid-1990s. That occurred, they believe, from people translocating raccoons from Florida. They brought it up to West Virginia to release it. These were hunters. They found that some of the raccoons were dead. They had them analyzed, and lo and behold, those animals died of rabies. Those raccoons were dead of rabies, and so the rabies virus was spread in infected raccoons in the mid-Atlantic area, and then it moved north several years to finally reach us in Massachusetts, and when it did, it hit us like an avalanche. I was hired by Massachusetts to pick up sick raccoons and sick animals that were found. I had a situation where I had to go for a raccoon, and the raccoon was not sick enough, and it was still healthy enough to be moving around too much. So here I am up on the second floor of a house porch. The raccoon was on the external side of the floor deck, and I'm trying to snare pole this thing, and I could not do it. I could not get that animal, couldn't get his head through the noose. I'm looking at my watch, and I'm looking at the fact that the school across the grassy area, school is going to be out in a few minutes. Now, you can imagine those kids coming out of school watching me with a raccoon. You think what those kids would be doing? What do you think those kids would be doing? They'd be watching me. I would be an attractive nuisance. What happens if one of those kids gets bit? So I made a decision. To the raccoon off the ledge. Falls to the concrete below, starts twitching. I run down, pick it up, throw it in the back of my truck, and leave. I think everything's good. A week later, I get a letter from that city telling me that my services are no longer required because they received a letter from a teacher that was watching me from that school. Everything she said in that letter was correct. She watched me try to catch that raccoon. I was diligently trying to do it. I wasn't able to do it. Then she watched with horror the raccoon off the ledge. All of that was completely true. Nothing she said in that letter, in my opinion, was inaccurate, except she didn't know the context. What would happen to me if I didn't do that and one of those kids got bit? You think her letter would be different?
Right.
So I'm not proud of that situation. I wish I'd done it a different way. The context did not allow me, in my opinion, in that moment, for about 15 minutes to catch that raccoon. And I was afraid that I would have a mass of kids around me, and that would have been a more dangerous situation. So I made a decision. Because people don't understand the context, even when you do everything you think is responsible, still get in trouble. And this is something that a lot of people don't understand. Now, I'm not ashamed of what I did. I think that sometimes you have to make hard with that decision, because the people who hired me, and they weren't even willing to ask for my side of the story. Facts and my perspective did not matter. And this is the kind of ideology that's now infecting America, where they're expecting everything to be perfect and no animals die. We're having a level that only God can fulfill. This is a dangerous, dangerous thing. So I don't want to be like a scaremonger here. The vast majority of wildlife control operators won't have this problem. But when it does occur, when an animal dies in your cage trap, and even though you were checking your trap every day, the animal dies, you can be brought up on cruelty charges, depending on where you live.
Right.
Because they're going to ask the question, did you make sure there was water in that cage? Consider where the cage was placed. Was it in the sun? Was it not in the sun? Did you make sure that the animal, the animal could have died just because it was old and it died? The question they're going to ask. They're going to blame you. And I think a lot of people aren't thinking about how the animal rights, animal protectionist movement is changing the culture. Far different. And unfortunately, we're not going to be given the tools to meet some of those things, because we're not going to get permission to use lethal injection, because we're not going to get permission to use the drugs. We should be given permission to use the drugs, but I don't think the AVMA establishment or the government's going to be willing to do that, because some of those drugs are dangerous and they won't want to deal with the paperwork, the licensing, and some of them are date rape type drugs, recreationally abused. And I think that's a headache they don't want to deal with. So what they're going to do is they're just going to keep banning. Maybe they're going to require you to check traps more frequently. I read an article where an animal control officer was criticized because they only checked traps every day. And the people that were criticizing said that the traps need to be checked, I think, every 12 hours or every 4 hours, or it might have been 8 hours. This is what happens. They just keep raising the bar required for humaneness. So if people think, when they put on their trucks, oh, I'm a humane according to who? Who says you're humane?
Right. Yeah. How
what standard are you?
Yeah. How safe is safe, and how natural is natural pest control? And
right. You guys have a similar situation on your side.
Right.
People where the term is interpreted in the eyes of the beholder. It's like a Rorschach test.
Right.
See what you want to see.
Right.
And this is a scary thing for me. This is why the National Wildlife Control Operators Association, we're trying to establish standards and definitions. A lot of wildlife control operators don't like to get angry with me because I'm so big on definitions, and I keep trying to tell the public anyone who will listen, the person who controls the language controls the debate. So when I use words like humane killing, I distinguish that from euthanasia. When I talk about foothold rather than leg hold, when I talk about cage trap rather than live trap, I hate the word live trap. I hate that word. Why? Because people think the cage trap is automatically humane. And everything that doesn't look like a cage trap must be cruel. It must be a death trap. That's not true. And so we reinforce the mythology in our clients. Cage traps are somehow magically humane. Anyone who's been in this business for any length of time will have animals die in cage traps. So the reality is what makes that trap humane? It's more complicated than that. So that's one reason for my book, Being Kind to Animal Pests, trying to educate people, understand that how you use that cage trap, how you use that box trap device, humane or not, or more humane versus less humane.
Right.
So it's complicated. And this is why we need skilled people, wildlife control operators, understand that they have skills that are valuable, that are important. Public should realize those skills are valuable and important, because it's not just simply, I set a trap and threw peanut butter in the back. That's all it took. No. It's more complicated than that.
Yeah, one of the things as a citizen, not in the industry, it's just stepping back, is we will institute a practice that sounds good and makes everybody feel good and make everybody happy, but then we'll end up with an epidemic on our hands, and then they're like, why isn't the government doing something to end this epidemic? And it was caused by
That's correct.
the decision they made to say, just like you mentioned before, let's put a one-way door, let's create a little home for them. Are you creating a recipe later for disaster that is it's a consequence of that action that seemed good at the time, but wasn't really based on science, wasn't really based on what we know about the diseases those animals transmit. And then all of a sudden, we have an epidemic on our hands, and we're like, even with the simple cases, and I deal with the issue with the Zika virus down here in Florida. And
right.
And I'm trying to educate clients and say, listen, get rid of the water on your property. You don't understand that those mosquitoes, they'll lay the eggs now, that thing will dry up, and 6 months later it'll get wet again, and those mosquitoes will hatch and they will come alive. And they don't understand, the biology of everything we have to deal with.
Right.
And so now all of a sudden you got these animals, and we're talking about the transmission from animals, and all of a sudden an insect that we didn't think would be a problem, ticks. I got a lot of clients that come from from the north and the northeast and the northwest. And I've had clients down here who got sick after they were bitten by ticks up there and got Lyme disease, and they didn't realize it. They were living here for almost a year with Lyme disease and didn't realize it. What is it that we're going to cause by not really, educating people? And this is one of the reasons why I think this podcast is a benefit, because I've said it, and I've said it at least a dozen times this year, that if we don't educate the public, if we don't educate our clients, if we don't use this media to educate the people, because we go to all the conferences, you go to the conferences, I go to the conferences, and nothing ever gets out of there. It stays within there. The client understands marketing. He's been marketed to and told, what he wants to believe through marketing, but he doesn't understand. And I think we're in the era of the transparency and about education and about having information online. And the problem is the information is getting buried by marketers or by people who have an agenda, like you said, but don't really talk about the truth. They just want to spin their side of it. And what we have to do is we have to come out of where we've been, the conference walls, and take that knowledge out and put it out into the public so that people really understand it in a way they can understand it. And, forever.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth in what you said. So I think that the challenge is people, I think the challenge is bigger than, I think the challenge is a couple of things. Number one, time. I mean, I get the fact that a lot of wildlife control operators and pest control operators are saying, look, I just want to do my job, make a living, and move on.
Right.
And I try to help them understand. I said, well, everything may be going great now, but if you're not dedicating a portion of your time to the long-term issues in the industry, it's a fool's errand here. You're missing. You're like trying to make as much money as you can before the ship sinks.
Right.
And the reality is a lot of people, that's a decision they're willing to make. They're like, well, you know what? If it happens to the next generation, what do I care? And that's their decision. That's certainly the case. Other people, I also find there's a personality issue. A lot of wildlife control operators they have a small business mindset. They don't like the tussle of politics. They don't like the fact that change is hard.
Right.
Politics is hard. Time to change people's minds. I tell people, look, the government 40 plus years to demonize cigarettes. Decades to demonize. That was government money to demonize cigarettes, right? I'm not a cigarette Nazi. I hope people don't smoke, but I'd rather have them smoke than drink. My point is using this analogy here, smoking, is that it took the government 40 plus years to demonize cigarettes. And I tell my colleagues, the animal rights activists working on this, Darwin, and they have a long-term perspective. What they've gained now didn't happen overnight. They've been working on this for decades. Do you have the same attitude? And the reality is they don't. They don't want to deal with it. It's too hard. And they don't want to join an association to work on this until there's a problem. And then they expect all this money to be available to fight it. I'm amazed at how that works. But in terms of convincing the public, I'm not convinced that education is going to work, and I'll tell you why. Because education can only be effective to people who have the moral capacity. Let me give you an illustration. We had a community in Massachusetts called Chelmsford, Massachusetts. They had a problem with beaver damming, and the dams were the impoundment of water was threatening the town well. The Massachusetts Trappers Association went into that town. They said, look, let us do our work. We will trap the beaver, get rid of the beaver, remove the beaver, and get these dams under control so that the flooding won't threaten the town wells. The Massachusetts Trappers Association went in there, did a bang-up job, got the thing done. Everything's honky-dory, back to what it should be. How do you think the town of Chelmsford voted during Question 1 in 1996? Do you think that they embraced the fur trapper of Massachusetts, said we're going to oppose this ban cruel trap campaign, and we're going to vote to support the trappers who protected our wells? Now, you can tell from my comments, clearly they voted the trappers and voted in favor of the ban cruel traps campaign. What education did they not get?
Right. I see what you're saying. I
tell my wildlife control friends, they think their customers love them. I said, no, your customers don't love you. Get over that notion that they love you. They want to get rid of you out of their mind as fast as they can because you remind them of a problem and they don't want to be thinking about you. Make your money and move on. They don't like you. Now, are there exceptions? Certainly there's exceptions. But the reality is the Pied Piper is one of the stories that I really gravitated to. What did the Pied Piper do? He came into the city, removed the rats. Once the rats were gone, the people didn't want to pay the bill. How is that different from wildlife control?
That's interesting.
People don't remember us. So education only carries you so far. People don't think about us killing animals. And that's the reality of it. I mean, it's a sad situation. Can it change? Perhaps. But then you have the problem of certain wildlife control operators who try to reinforce the mythology that their clients have because they find if they reinforce the mythology of their client, they make more money. So if they tell the client, oh, no, I don't have to kill any animals. Everything I do is the animal's always going to be living a long, happy life after I'm dead. They can reinforce that mythology. Some of them do it honestly. Some of them don't do it. Some of them do it dishonestly. They'll just take the animal away and kill it. Other times they'll just release it. Some states it's legal. Some states it's not legal. So I don't have a problem with wildlife control operators doing one-way doors. But sometimes people have to recognize that when they do one-way doors, there are situations where even when you're doing everything you can not to kill the animal in that structure, that the animal is so aggressive trying to get back in, the only way you're going to stop the damage is you're going to have to whack it. I even got a major animal protectionist group to admit that to me, because they were in the business of doing one-way doors and animal exclusion on houses, and even they had to admit they couldn't do it 100% of the time. There were a few occasions where animals had to die. To live is to kill. I tell people, whether you need medication, whether you need therapy, whatever you need to do, you need to realize to live is to kill. It's the bottom line. I don't care whether you're a vegan, whether you're a vegetarian, whatever. You're living on the basis of something else dying. And I'm not talking about plants. There's all kinds of animals being killed to protect crops. There's animals being killed on the highway when that food is being transported to you. Animals are being killed of aircraft, all kinds of things. Why? But they don't know about it. Why? Because we don't do our business trying to make shows for the public. We try to do this killing in a responsible way that doesn't offend public sensibilities. Still happening.
Right. Yeah, it's the stuff that we don't want to know about our government they're doing, but they're doing it anyway.
They're doing it anyway. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so that's just, when I give a presentation, I'll ask people, how many people in this room flown an airplane? And almost everyone today has flown an airplane. I said, do you know how many animals had to die to fly in an airplane? And you should see the shock in their faces. Because there's all kinds of animal control work being done that they don't even know about. Their life safety. Valuable thing. Right? And so this is we have a conflicted society where we want the illusion that we don't have to kill anything and that I'm a good person and that that I can just live in balance with nature. It's a myth. There's no balance. You either have your thumb on nature or nature has its thumb on you. That's the bottom line. And I think Florida found that out with the Zika virus, right? All these people that were anti-chemical, all of a sudden Zika emerges, and all of a sudden they're pro-chemical.
Yeah, it always
what a
is.
Shock.
Yeah, it always happens that way. People are they're like, no, don't do anything, and then all of a sudden, why didn't anybody do anything? I mean, you're almost in the case where you're darned if you do and you're darned if you don't. I got here.
Right.
I mean, we got massive urbanization. I mean, my county is 1.8 million people. Okay, and between the two counties, we're like 2.8 million people in two counties. And every time
more people than the entire state of Montana.
Yeah, and we're all like in several.
We have 1.2 million. We have 1.2 million in our state.
Okay, well, we got 1.8 million in one county, and whenever I see construction happening, I said, watch what's going to happen. You're going to start seeing an uptick in raccoons, in possums, in snakes, and then everybody's calling us. And, what do? I got a possum on my lawn. I said, leave him alone. He's going to move. You got a raccoon running through my pool. He's taking a dump in my pool. I need you to come get him. We don't do that. But it's constant where we have this urbanization that keeps growing, and especially in big cities like ours where we're still growing. And all of a sudden, this becomes an uptick. And, I tell people, I said, I can't just transport that animal. I can't just put it in a cage and take it away and dump it in the Everglades. That's what everybody wants us to do. And I see people doing it, and I say, we can't do that. That's, I got peacocks in our neighborhood. They're protected in Miami-Dade. We can't touch them. You're going to have to live with them. So in other words, until it becomes a sore on your home,
it's okay. And then when you're saying, well, you know what the cost would be to do what you want me to do, and then they're gasping. So I look at it from the business perspective and saying, you can't win with this situation. It seems like that's why I haven't touched it with a 10-foot pole. I didn't want anything to do with it. I'm sticking to insects. We're even under fire with landscapes. I mean, that's coming under fire with lawn and ornamental because of the enormous amount of pesticides you have to use compared to GHP pest. And that's a huge problem. That became a huge problem in the Northeast. I think it was either in the state of Massachusetts also. Are they the People's Republic of Massachusetts? Huh?
What was the problem again?
Well, there was several counties have already banned the use of lawn insecticides, where you can't use it.
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. Yeah. I wouldn't doubt it.
Several counties, and mostly in the Northeast, it seems to be the problem, where they banned it.
Well, I think that's the case. And yeah, that sounds like something people would do, because what happens is a little bit of information is dangerous.
Yeah.
A little bit of information is dangerous. It takes time to understand the context. So it's easy for people to say, ban cruel traps. And then I remind people, then I tell people, I said, well, did you know that the foothold was used to capture river otter, to translocate them to different parts of America to restore them to their original range? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And people say, yeah, that's a good thing. And I said, well, did you know what trap they used to do that with? And they said, no. I said, a foothold. And I said, did you know that? And they said, no. I said, the question I have is, why didn't you know that? Why did no one tell you that a foothold was used to capture those river otter, to translocate them, to restore them to their natural range that we had in America? And they just stare at me. And I said, you know why they didn't use a cage trap to do that? The river otter were breaking their teeth on the cage. And they don't grow their teeth back.
So they would have been
defenseless. So the injury to their foot, they could heal from. They could heal from the injury in their foot, but they couldn't heal
once they lose their teeth, they're
gone.
But
it's easy to say footholds are evil. Just like it's easy for people to say glue boards are bad. I don't say glue boards are bad. I say we have to be careful on how we use them. Because there are going to be cases where you're going to have to use a glue board to catch that rodent, because maybe he's ignoring everything else. I heard that from Bobby Corrigan, Dr. Bobby Corrigan,
right,
rat expert par excellence. He said he tried all these different things. Finally, he had to glue board the world. That's how that rat was just so neophobic. But that was the last, not the first thing.
Right.
But again, that's a simple lie, easier to believe than a complex truth.
Correct.
And the problem is it's always going to be difficult for us to sloganeer against people that are always looked at, can slogan, ban this, ban this, ban this, and for us to explain, well, you lose, because here's the problem with wildlife control. This is why I tell people, don't go into wildlife control, go into bugs. Here's why. The issue of trophic levels. Trophic levels means that there's always going to be more plants than there are insects. There's always going to be more insects than there are animals. Because prey species is always going to be more numerous than the predator species. We'll get that. So you'll have in wildlife control, as a general rule of thumb, only 10% of the people suffer wildlife damage, where you may have 100% of the people suffering from insect or fungus damage to plants. So when you think about it numerically, only 10% of the people are suffering 90% of the wildlife damage. The vast majority of Americans, why do they care about wildlife control? They never encountered it.
Right.
It's easy to ban something they think they don't need.
Right, because it's not seen all the time, so it's not seen or heard. Therefore, it's really not necessary for a certain percentage of the time that it occurs.
Not necessary.
Yeah, it's not necessary until it happens to you.
So, until it happens to them, right? And so now it may happen to them eventually, but by then it's too late. After question one passed, I would go into a house and I would say, well, I could have solved this problem doing with this trap has been banned. I had a person tell me, well, I didn't know that law applied to you. And I said, did you read it? He says, well, I thought that law was to ban the trappers out in the woods. Read it?
So there's a difference between
make a distinction between the
the mentality between a guy that's hunting and a guy that's doing a job to save your property or save you $10,000 that it's going to cost you in rewiring that attic, because the guy ate through everything. Yeah, or he falls through the roof in the middle of the night. Yeah, got it.
The public didn't read it. Now, I don't think they should have banned it on the fur trapper anyways. That's a separate topic. The point was, here was this person who didn't even realize she was voting for.
Right. Yeah, it was purely done on emotion.
So this is the challenge that we start. So people wonder why I'm so animated about this topic is because we don't get the support, and I hope to God someday we will get the support from the pest control community, because if you think you're immune from this, you're wrong. You may be farther down the line. You're going to be in the crosshairs too.
Right.
Particularly when it comes to rodenticides. We've already seen that in California, where rodenticides were almost banned.
Right. No, we had the law changed to the FIFRA Act, and we can't put stations 100 feet away from a structure, and the secondary rodenticides are under fire. So yeah, it's going to be a mess for a lot of people. Europe is more advanced in that area than we are, but eventually, I've said it's going to come to us, and we're going to have to deal with it. So So you're gonna be here so tell me what's going on, because you're gonna be here in October. I'm hoping I can go see you. I've been invited to go up there and do some things with some people, so I might hang out over there and go visit again. I was there last year at Expo in Orlando, and so I might go. What is it that you're involved with now? I mean, what's going on? You no longer do the trapping. And so what is it that you're involved with now that in the industry?
My day job is I'm an employee of the Montana Department of Agriculture. And so you have to say this because people don't get into trouble. So what I'm saying here is on the basis of me personally. It's not representing the Montana Department of Agriculture. And so they're not endorsing this. This is purely me. I'm on my own time right now, so if someone wants to complain, these are my opinions, not the opinions of the Montana Department of Ag. All right? Those are those standard things you have to say when you're in government work. But my day job is I'm the vertebrate pest specialist for the Montana Department of Agriculture, and my job is to help producers control vertebrate pests. These are things like ground squirrels, prairie dogs, birds, species like that, which can do incredible damage to crop production or agriculture. And I also help the public as well deal with vertebrate pests that are inside their buildings. Like I have publications on house mice and commensal rodents and that sort of thing. So I do this through pesticide training, publications, workshops, phone consultations, and also I have a research component where I can do some research. Some examples of research that I've done. I've done some work on the propane oxygen exploders. You've probably seen them on YouTube, the Rodentinator. These are propane oxygen devices that injects a mixture of propane and oxygen into a burrow system, and then you ignite it. And then the concussive force kills the animal inside the burrow. They're pretty cool. I had a chance to test those out on prairie dogs last year, and I'm publishing that research. This year I did some research on using zinc phosphide product on the control of Richardson ground squirrels without pre-bait. So we didn't use pre-bait. So we have some of that research this year, and so I do some. I'm able to have a little bit of research components. I'm able to play with some things that oftentimes, a practitioner in the field doesn't have time to do. So they're trying to make a living, right? So, And then I try to aggregate that information to help people use tools that are economically efficient, but also protective of the environment and the goals of the property owner on his or her property, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
So that's what I do in my day job. I'm also a board member of the National Wildlife Control Operators Association. I'm the Western Director. We are a organization dedicated for people in the business of wildlife control, and that's just hired a part-time training technician in the organization. He's going to go around training things. The association has a variety of certified training programs that we've created. More are in the works. And then in terms of my business side of things, I do writing. I write articles. I just had an article come out in Pest Control Technology, which was an excerpt of my book, Being Kind to Animal Pests. I just came out in the latest issue. I have a host of articles that I have published in various outlets, including Wildlife Control Technology Magazine, Trapper, Fur Taker. I'm a book review writer for Fur Taker Magazine. I have a blog on my website, Wildlife Control Consultant. So I've been involved in this industry for a very long time. And so my interests are varied. My passions are wildlife damage inspection. So I have a book on that, the third edition of the Wildlife Damage Inspection Handbook. But what I'm finding is that, unfortunately, people aren't reading. So none of my books are bestsellers by any stretch of the imagination, which is unfortunate because I think we're losing something in our society, because as much as the internet is important, we need to have context, and that often doesn't come with a Google search.
Right.
You sometimes need to read things and see the bigger picture before just getting a quick answer. I had one guy write online once. He says, well, information is free. And I said, yeah, information's free if you're willing to find the sources, find the right sources, read them, understand them, synthesize them, and apply them. Yep, information is free.
If you have all the time in the world.
Right? So,
yeah.
Yeah, he never responded to that comment. But my point was that sometimes, because the internet has so much information, people think wisdom comes from that.
Yes.
And sometimes it's more complicated than that. Is that you may have an answer, but do you have an answer that works? Like, I'll have a question. People will call me up and they'll say, Stephen, I need to know what is the best way to get rid of prairie dogs. It's like asking what's the best truck. If I don't know what you need the truck for, I don't know what the best truck is going to be.
Right.
The same way with someone calling you up, what's the best pesticide to do X? You don't know if it's a sensitive environment, what the wishes of the client are, how bad the infestation is. You may say a vacuum is the best control. It wouldn't be a pesticide at all.
Yeah, one client asked me the other day.
This is the kind of...
Yeah, one client asked me the other day, what is the best to control weeds? So I opened up the back of my truck, and I pulled out 5 products, and and I said, pick one. You probably get it wrong because you have to know what weed you're dealing with. I've got chickweed. You don't know what chickweed is. He doesn't know. So I pulled up another container, and I was like, here's everything for fungus. Here's everything for insect. Oh, here's on this side. I got 36 products on my truck to deal with every problem that I could encounter in the field. And the customer thinks, why can't you just spray it with mint oil? And I'm like, I said, that's not what organic pest control is. And it has to do more with, when I talk, you're going to spend several $100s on exclusion to fix a lot of the problems in your home. They're thinking, but that's not organic. I says, yes, it is, because I didn't have to use a chemical to exclude that pest, but I fixed the problem.
That's right.
So the simplistic. I think definitely the majority of the society that is basically a Twitter and a Facebook society where a simple 120 character explanation is going to basically answer your question, and the reality is it's not, and so. I don't know. I think we're going to have to do more podcasts and videos, and basically hit them with the detailed knowledge. And we're doing a lot of videos this year. We're going to be putting out on things like that, because I think that's where we're going to have to. I mean, nobody's reading the books. I mean, Barnes and Noble is.
They're not reading anymore. And it's sad because you lose. And I think videos are very important. I think videos are critical. I've done some videos. I think they're critically important sometimes for technique. hard to write up the technique.
Right.
When you could show someone a lot faster. But sometimes when we're dealing with principles and more abstract concepts, work is where you have to go with, right? Yeah. And where important. And I think, unfortunately, we're losing some of that. I can cry about that all day long. It's one reason why I thought, well, the podcast, I've learned from podcasts, and I figured I wanted to contribute to podcasts. You've been gracious enough to tell me be geeky, and I'm like, okay, I'll be geeky if I would get permission, right? So yeah. It felt good. So, I sent you another one today where I basically reviewed an article that came out in 1963. So the idea is just to give people a broader context because lives, we're under time pressure, and I think I don't want to end on a negative note here. I want to be sure that we end on a positive note, and that is the listeners, you are not the problem. We're not talking to you. If you're listening to the podcast, you are part of the solution. Thank you. If you're at least willing to open yourself up, to expose yourself to something, and that is always to be appreciated. I have to keep doing that when I do training events. Is we bang home the importance of education, and then we have to remind them, look, everyone, you're not the problem because you're here. So you don't want to beat up on the congregation who has taken the education and they're not being educated enough. No, you are part of the solution. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, and we hope that small way we're helping better. You're doing, because what you do is important, and I don't know if people realize how much we protect property and health, safety, and food quality. These are important values that often get mistaken. If you look at the videos on TV and movies, controllers don't come out looking very good. Yeah. And that's sad.
Yeah, no, I mean, we
name one movie where a pest controller is viewed in a positive sense.
Right.
And that's wrong.
Yeah. No, the stereotypical,
and wildlife control. So I want to encourage people, you have a respectful job, you have a valuable job. Be proud of what you do.
Right. Even
though we're in a group where we're doing things that doesn't necessarily, the news, praise, isn't considered sexy. People should be proud of you doing your pest control work just as much as if they're proud of their child becoming a lawyer.
And then that's another debate there about lawyers.
Well, I think that, perhaps, but I think people know where I'm going with that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
In terms of sometimes, you didn't go to college.
Right.
No, I'm people's life, property, and there's peace of mind, and you're helping them. You think of bed bugs and mice. There's a variety. Not everything that pest control is for aesthetics.
Right.
Sometimes it's true health and
safety
involved here, where people's life and well-being are at stake.
Right.
And I think we forget that sometimes, and that this is valuable. We need to make sure that we're not, we're the pest controller. I'm the pest controller.
Right.
Stopping something that's bad. And we need to have that kind of a pep talk. And I'm not really much of a pep kind of guy, but I think that we need to let people know that this is an honorable profession and it's important. And that when you do your job well, and you're protecting the environment, and that you're doing things in a responsible, legal manner. It's beyond legal. Legal is the minimum, but a legal, ethical, appropriate method solve that problem for clients. If you've earned your wages, be proud of that.
Right. No, I totally agree. I'm with you 100%. I love what you're sending. I've listened to it. It's going to be out soon. I think we're going to we're going to put this one out first because people get to know you, and then we're going to go ahead and publish everything in the next couple of weeks that you've been sending out. And I really do hope
Great. I'll be sending more.
I hope it blesses a lot of people and, guys that are struggling. I mean, the guys that are listening to this and they're struggling in their heart. They're saying, man, I'm just getting beat up all the time. They need to know people are with them and that we are, we're standing together, two different industries, but we're standing together. And I think that's important. And we'll publish, if people want to get a hold of you, what would be the best way to contact you or, get information from you or whatever?
Email would be the best because, as we know, most of America is on the East Coast, and I'm on Mountain Time.
Yeah.
But email WildLife Control Consultant at gmail.com would be probably the best. So WildLife Control Consultant at gmail.com. My website is wildlifecontrolconsultant.com.
Perfect. So what we'll do is we're going to put those in the notes, and then people can get a hold of you. It's been real fun talking to you, man. You're a wealth of information. I really did appreciate your time.
Well, I'm really glad. I'm glad to be part of the team, and I'm looking forward to doing a lot more podcasts. Do welcome ideas. I have what I'm interested in, but I want what the audience, what the listeners are interested in. That can kind of direct me. Otherwise, I'll just talk about issues that are important to me. And
yeah, no, I mean, we're going to post it.
I heard one already on deer mice. What's that?
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and post it also in the group. So once it comes out, people can discuss it in the groups that we have at the Pest Geek Podcast listeners group. So we're going to be posting there. I haven't been able to do a lot of social media anymore. I really had to disconnect it from my phone because I am so busy. Summer came and I was putting in 12 and 13 hours in the field, which I've never done. And I was getting out in the morning at 9 o'clock in the morning, and it was 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I was still out there. So it was just an enormous. Over the summer we had over a 40% growth, which was uncontrollable. If that's a term that a control person should be using, is uncontrollable. But yeah, we just we got hit really hard, and it was great. But we're training people and hiring, and that's the biggest problem we have is training and hiring people, and it's a constant theme that we're dealing with in all the groups. Is finding the right people. So yeah, man. So I haven't. Go ahead.
Yeah. I've got a question. About that. I was listening to your, I've been listening to your podcast. Actually, I think I've almost finished all of them. I think I've got a couple left.
You poor man.
But I haven't listened. Well, we have long driving times here in Montana. Nothing's close.
Right.
So, I have a lot of time. When I drive to the Helena, which is our capital, that's a 3-hour drive for me.
Wow.
So it takes me 2 hours just to get to the closest Walmart.
Wow.
That's almost 140 miles away.
Wow.
So we're a remote state. So here's I've heard you say on multiple occasions. I'm putting you on the spot here, I know.
Uh-huh.
This is sort of something in my heart, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why in a little bit after you answer the question. You said that you won't hire someone with experience because you want someone that you can mold in your company's philosophy. Now, I get that.
Right.
I do understand that. Someone who tried to be hired by a pest control company where I was wanting to get an internship, I was willing to work for free. I was already licensed. Didn't really know pest control. I had a minimal experience, but I knew wildlife control.
Uh-huh.
No one put me on.
Wow.
What I'm afraid of when I've tried to get into,
I lost you there for a second.
they won't hire me, or they won't even let me work for free. And I wonder if that rule is being held by a lot of people because it really shook my world. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? I can't even work for free for someone.
Right. I don't have that as a hard and fast rule because when we look for senior management, we're going to probably have to look at people with experience. We're looking at from the technical experience of a pest control person. Usually what we're finding in the marketplace here is when I get people, I'm getting people that are burned out from other large companies, and they've been very, very badly trained. And when I'm trying to educate them on retraining, they want to go back to the cheating and the bad habits. And it's much more difficult.
I got you.
It's much more difficult to untrain somebody who's been trained badly than to train somebody that has no experience and therefore won't pick up the bad habits. And that's where our challenge has been. But if I'm looking for, a field manager or somebody, a certified operator, to run a company, obviously I'm looking at something different. I'm looking more of the leadership ability, and the management ability than the actual technical ability, and whether they can, say, I get it. I'm in senior management. I understand all the bad habits. My company, I deplore them. And that's why I don't want to do it anymore. But from a technical, from a technical ability, most of the people, the industry, and from what I'm seeing, just to reiterate a little bit more, is that the average technician in pest control is really averaging about 1 to 3 years. And then they're burning out with the large companies because of the hours and things like that. So what I'm getting is a lot of people applying that are already burned out, and I've hired them, and I've tried, and they're just they're bitter, and they carry a lot of the things they can't shake, that were done to them, and
Oh, that's very sad.
And it is, and it is, and it's just better off to let them do something else that they can feel good about than to say, I don't want to be in the field anymore. I want to be in management, and unfortunately, I can't hire 20 managers. That's where
right.
And I'm thinking we're taking it down to the lowest level, not in a that everybody who's in the pest control who's worked for another company is terrible. It's just that's been our experience from when we interview and when we hire them. And I just went through that not too long ago.
Because this is why it's important to me, because I've tried. I've wanted to learn. I've wanted to learn the insect side. It makes me more marketable down the road, and I'm studying for the ACE exam right now.
Awesome.
But that field there's some because I'm an educator, I can't. It's important, and I don't want to diminish that, but I can tell you it only takes you so far. I'm one of those people where if I can get doing some of the activities, it gives me a deeper appreciation for how to explain something. Right. And also the challenges that are being faced by technicians that I can't obtain from a book. I'm trying to learn the insect side. Right. So I'm like, how am I going to have a company hire me even on a part-time basis if the perspective you have, and I've heard that before. You're not the first person I've heard that before. I've heard it from wildlife control guys that won't hire anyone with wildlife control because they want to shape them on their own. Because I think I know all this stuff about insects, and I don't. Right. Yeah. How do I break through that? So this has been at a personal level. So yeah. And here's the other side of that. Wildlife is one thing. Yeah. Here's the other side of that. I'm in what it is in the business world and in education, because I'm a big fan of education. I'm actually teaching a class at our extension service on the 25th of this month. I deal with a lot of the entomologists, and I deal a lot with the county people. What a lot of, if you look at the industry as a whole, just for people who don't know this, or maybe your people are going to listen to this, there's only about 40-something thousand pest control companies in America. Well, there's only about 150,000 technicians. The average company is a single man in a truck, or a single man working with his wife, and maybe adding the cousin, on the company. Most people don't want to train other people. There's this mentality that if I train this guy,
or if I talk to him, he's going to know all my secrets. And then when he's done, he's going to go start his own company and compete against me. I mean, it's just this lack mentality.
Totally get that. But I would have signed any non-compete they put in front of me because I was looking to leave the state.
Yeah, and that's
the thing that frustrated me.
Yeah, and it's that
I wouldn't have been competing with him at all.
Yeah, but still, there's this mentality that, I have a biblical worldview.
Oh no, I get it.
So to me, I give away all the knowledge. I started this 3 years ago. We're going to be on close to 200 podcasts before I think the end of the month, and I teach people what I do, and I still get 100 people in a room nodding their head, it can't be done. And I'm giving you the free information. I'm telling you everything I know how to do it, and then you're still telling me it can't be done, and I've been doing it for 12 years. It's just a small man mentality. They don't have a business mentality.
It is.
They have a technical mentality, and they think being a technician, and I recommend everyone who has a technical mentality and is thinking about getting into business to read the E-Myth, because it will shatter everything you think you know about running a business. And it will really shake you to your foundation. But my God owns a cattle on 1,000 hills, and he can make all grace abound towards me. So I don't have to really worry about, I have a guy right now that I hired him, and he's never had a career. He's 35 years old, went to college, just hired him. And he told, and I said, why do you really want it? He says, because I really want to be part of something that I can grow and eventually own something. And I said, I will teach you everything that I know, and we'll work out a deal. And I'm not afraid that he's going to take off in 2 years and go build his company. That stuff doesn't cause any fear in me. I know what I'm capable of doing. I know that I'm a trainer, I'm an educator. That's part of how I'm wired. And if I can help other people be more successful than me, great. That will be my legacy. At the end of the night, I'm going to bed.
You're an unusual boss. That was good, because I've learned when I was self-employed, what I eventually learned was that I'm not self-employed. And, some people need to be number one. Some people are designed to be number two.
Yeah.
And that's what I found out that I am. I'm a number two guy.
Right.
The inside management, the person who does the jobs that the boss doesn't want to do. So you have the visionary, the vision seeker. I think you're a vision caster in that regard. Someone, then you have to have your detail guy to do the implementation. I've learned that I'm the implementator. The problem is how do you find a boss who has your attitude that can accept someone
I think
without being threatened by it.
Yeah, and I think it's like everything else. When I decided that I needed to grow my company, I had to change my mentality from being a technician to being a CEO, and then had to have that mindset of a CEO, whether I was a CEO of one person or 10, it doesn't matter. It's the mindset. Right. And then I had to realize that I got to sell the job the same way I sell my service. And I got to sell the vision. And I have to go through I have to go through about 200 applicants to get to one guy that's worth interviewing when we put him through the process. That right now. So I think it's the same way as finding people that have, how can two walk together if they don't agree? I mean, that's fundamental.
I agree.
So looking for, I'm looking for that person, that employee that I can bring along and walk together with them and say, I'll show you how to be successful in this business, because the more successful, the more you know, the more successful I'll be. I don't have a lack mentality. So I have a business mentality. And, so I am about to grow this, and we're growing. And so that's I think it has to go with you going out and finding somebody that has the same vision. And I find that in different people. Like I've been wanting to go to the Southeast Conference with Dr. Kohler. I've talked to him several times. Philip Kohler at the University of Florida, entomology. The guy's amazing. He's an amazing human being. You sit down and you talk to him, and he'll talk to anybody and teach anybody and train it, and the students just adore him. I mean, it's just the kind of guy. And so those are the people I want to surround myself with. So I look for those people, and I just ignore the 99, that I can't do anything with. that's what it
Right,
comes.
right,
I mean,
right.
I just don't have enough time. I'm 48 years old. My days are numbered, and I have to make the most that I can. And so I just have the end in mind. And I think that, that's, and like I said, if somebody comes to me, I talk to guys all the time that are my competitors, and they ask me, what are you doing? And I tell them exactly what I'm doing. I guess I just have a different way of looking at things. I'm not naive. I know I'm in business. I know I'm competing to make money, but I don't need to cut your throat or slice you in the back to get it done. I just don't have to.
Yeah, that's an amazing thing. I think I'm speaking on Friday, but I'm going to be there in Pest World on Wednesday. I fly in for Wednesday evening.
Okay.
And then I'm leaving Saturday, if that helps. It'd be great to connect up with you.
Yeah, man. I'm getting invited. So I'm gonna. Hopefully, I can get down there and talk to a couple people and make it happen this year. I think it's going to be possible.
Great.
So I look forward to talking to you. Look forward to hearing what more you have. And it's been a ton of fun. I really appreciate this. So if you got any final words, I'll leave it to you.
Just keep learning, everyone. Keep listening to the podcast and send in your ideas for future podcasts for wildlife control. Anything with a spine, people, and your ex-girlfriend, ex-wife. Just animals. Keep it animals related, and we'll be able to talk about those because I do research stuff. So I don't claim to know it all. I claim to know where to find it all, though.
That's important.
Glad to be on board.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I really appreciate this, man. Have a great one.
Take care, man.
All right,
Bye-bye.
buddy. We hope you have enjoyed this edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. Until next time, have a pestacular day.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.